as the big peak experience of great inspiration, very often people feel very inspired after a psychedelic retreat. Of course, after a couple of weeks, that might start to fade. Or another way we understand it in terms of the spectrum of selves model is, of course, the more childlike, the more rigid, more avoidant selves start to reappear and go, hang on, maybe everything isn't so great. Or an old thought like, oh, I thought I was cured by the psychedelic ceremony, but now I'm feeling insecure again. I'm broken. I'm not good enough. These old classic thoughts like I'm not good enough can reemerge, say, 2 weeks later. If you can catch them in those moments with exercises like this, then people often did find that helpful. I've got some nice longitudinal graphs of where people's psychological flexibility was fading. Um, but then after doing an exercise like this, it seemed to rehabilitate itself and rise again in a sustainable way. Would anybody be willing to have me demonstrate this one with you?
I'll do it if you want. Nobody else
Okay.
will.
Thank you so much, Charles,
Sure, no
for
worries.
volunteering. So, are you aware of any unhelpful thoughts about your self-concept that have emerged?
Sure, I'll give you a classic. Something's wrong with me.
Okay, thank you. So, well done. You've noticed the thought there's something wrong with you that can show up sometimes. So if we see that as a more, yeah, how old is that thought? Is that like, does it feel like a critical thought or a child, like a really old from early childhood thought? How old
Oh
is
yeah,
that?
that's really yeah, that's really old. It's maybe a little over 60 years old.
Okay, so that sounds like that would be a child one, maybe.
Mhm.
Okay. And a more compassionate, expanded sense of self when you've been more aware
Mm.
of
Sure, sure.
the value. What perspective might your compassionate self have?
I'm whole, complete, aware.
Your whole complete aware. Okay. So I'm going to do a little two-part exercise of just contemplating and even experiencing these two perspectives. Okay.
Mhm.
So first of all, I'd like you to just imagine. So you don't have to believe it or anything. It's just imagine the reality just for a split second, just as though you're an actor, maybe, that there's something wrong with you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, yeah, you can just nod your head when that you connected with that perspective.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Imagine that you're complete and whole. Was that your word? What's your full wording, your compassionate selves wording on that?
Complete, whole, aware.
Complete, whole, aware. That's it. Yeah. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware. Just let me know when you've got that one.
Mhm.
Thank you. Imagine that there's something wrong with you. So now we're just going to keep flowing, but toggling between the two and see what that's like. Thank you. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware.
Mhm.
Thank you. Imagine that there's something wrong with you. Thank you. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware.
Mhm.
Okay, I just generally keep doing this as long as the person's engaged. Quite often
Mhm.
you will actually experience that it's a bit like you can see the diffusion happening in that the person quite often it'll take them longer and longer to get the more self-defeating negative one and a little bit easier to connect with, yeah, a different perspective. And of course, from an ACT point of view, we don't want to have the agenda of just trying to make certain thoughts go away necessarily. But yeah, before I say any more, I'd like to ask you, Charles, what was your experience of trying that out?
Well, for one thing, I really enjoyed it. I get such a distinct felt sense on each of those poles. It's so distinctly different for me in coming to whole, complete aware. I feel this brightness and an uplifting, throughout the tissues. And then the shame-based one, something's wrong with me. I feel this tightening and this withdrawal. And it's so I associate with such a network of negative behaviors. And the recent work I've been doing around these and finding other ways of being. So for me, it just has this felt sense to it. That's like a roadmap. I like that exercise. It took me a while to understand what you were pointing at when you first introduced this. I think when we were in some of the other retreats, but for me, it is starting to make sense. So thank you for letting me volunteer.
Yes, thank you so much for volunteering.